Greetings Sonic Soundheads, my name's Adam and my musical project goes by the name of Sonic Electric on the internet, and I've been taking part in the Loopop Mega Contest using samples taken from the unreleased synths from 2021 Superbooth. So this video is going to break down the track I produced for that contest, layer by layer, track by track, sample by sample, so we can sort of see how I produced it, see some of the methodologies I used, some of the corners I cut, and little creative shortcuts I used. Before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit about my approach to this project and my approach to sort of songwriting in general. I have an old punk mindset. My approach to songwriting is from a chord progression, riff, an arrangement perspective, and I've been trying to meld that old punk mindset with, you know, an ambient synth aesthetic over the last few years since I started taking music production seriously, and I try and sort of meld those two worlds. I had no time for EQing or sound designing. I spent most of the time on arrangement, trying to get a song structure that I was happy with and felt that was the most important thing. I had no time for fancy slicing and dicing. I used the tools available to me in Cubase to do the heavy lifting. So we can, when we're in a creative pinch, you know, it's good to have these little tools that can help us out. So we'll get into that in some detail. I left it to the last minute, which is sort of fairly typical, isn't it? I didn't read the instructions until the song was completed, and I was looking for instructions for uploading, and then I realised I'd kind of broken the rules. So number 5, I cheated. I used a guitar. I'm a guitarist, it's what I do, it's what I know. Like I said, I try and meld that old punk and rock aesthetic with the ambient music mindset, or is it the punk mindset with the ambient aesthetic? Either way, you know, that is my MO with these musical things. So rules are there to be broken, so I broke that rule. So let's talk a little bit about my workflow, specifically to this track and in general as I approach songwriting. The first step of the process was developing a chord structure that I liked. I'd been playing around with some ideas in C Phrygian, but I was just trying to be too clever and I couldn't make it work, so I abandoned that idea and settled on good old-fashioned natural minor. As I was playing around with that scale on the guitar, I was finding some chords that worked really well together harmonically. Cubase's chord track was a real help here, allowing me to instantly experiment with different chords and voicings. This is really where I spent a lot of my time, at least early on. I ended up with a 16-bar progression: C minor, A flat, G minor, D diminished, C minor, A flat, G7. I really liked the non-diatonic borrowed chord G7. Both the D diminished and the G7 have a lot of tension that really pulls nicely back to the tonic C minor, and I'm really happy with how all of that ended up. Once I was happy with that, it was a matter of getting an arrangement down in Cubase. My workflow here uses chord track to sequence the synth parts. I start with a concept document that uses an arranger track in Cubase to help me test different song structures. Once I've got something I like that flows, I flatten that out into an arrangement document for adding detail and refining the arrangement. At this point, I bake the chord track into actual MIDI events that I edit for better voice leading. I'll shift some parts up or down an octave to spread the sonic content around a bit. Normally at this point I would render out stems for mixing, but time forced me to do just a quick mix on the arrangement. I used automation lanes to fade mixer levels on a couple of tracks, to send levels on one or two tracks, filter sweeps on a few tracks. That was really it for mixing. Again, my normal workflow here would be to render out the mix to a stereo pre-master and use a mastering document to finish up, typically 2 or 3 days after the mix is done. I obviously couldn't do that here, so I just cheated again and used a Waves L1 and iZotope Ozone on the master bus and called it good. So with all that out of the way, let's jump into Cubase and take a look at the samples I used and how I used them. Okay, so I knew I wanted to open and close with some of the Heimbach noise texture, and I settled on the Nagra Nymphs N4. And if I just solo that track, so if I look at the inserts, I have an instance of Eventide Physion on there, and I basically have two delays, and it's set to analyze the tonal quality rather than the transients, because there's not a lot of transient content in this. And if we bypass that, you can see it adds a lot of, it doesn't really mess with the sort of tonal structure too much, but it moves it around in the sort of stereo space and just makes it a bit more swimmy is the word I like to use. So I also wanted to use some of the files in the texture folder as the basis for a granular synth. Now I know that Loopop said not to do this, but these are like the bed upon which the meat of the song sits, so they're not really like a massive focal part of the song, and so rules are there to be broken anyway, right? So just wanted to get some nice pad sounds, thick pad sounds with lots of motion. Let's take a look at Pad Shop. We'll solo that real quick. So in Pad Shop, I just dragged in some of the samples to audition them, see how they sounded. I ended up with one of the Nymphs, the N3 sample on the B channel, and on the A channel I had the Heimbach Nagra 2, Nymphs 2, and I basically loaded up a preset and just swapped out the sample and then tweaked some of the settings along here, like the random and the spread. Nothing too much. I didn't want to mess with the sound design too much. But what I did have to do right here was adjust the root note so that, what was that, C2? Have I messed with it now? Oh dear. Let's put it back at C2. C3. So I played a note on the guitar, played a note on the keys, and adjusted that root note until it matched. As you can see on channel B, it's an F sharp 3, so that had to be sort of tuned by ear. Again, just nice swimmy pad sounds that I really liked. On the inserts, I just have a compressor. I have a T-Racks compressor on that, and I have a T-Racks EQ, but obviously any compressor or EQ would do. I just really like these ones, and I use them on everything. So that's the pad shop sound. And again, the MIDI parts here, these are the MIDI parts that are generated by copying the chord track data over. It bakes it into MIDI, and having done some adjustment, nudging up, some voice leading stuff where I shifted things up or down. But this is the basic chord structure. There are C minor, A flat, G minor, D diminished, so on and so forth. And that is playing that sort of pad sound in the pad shop. If we go to the scanner, it's very much the same exercise. I brought in a number of samples, dragged and dropped them in here. Initially, I dragged, let me see what, Nagra 3, Nagra 5, Heimbach Nagra, one of the Dupfer samples. So I dragged a bunch of samples in here, and what I was intending to do was to morph between them, but I just didn't have time to mess with that. So what I ultimately ended up doing was just settling on the LPM4 sample and just left it at that. Adjusted some of the LFO stuff, moving it around, adjusted some of these parameters in here till I found a portion of the sample that I really liked, changed the envelope and some of those parameters. Just small tweaks from a loaded preset. Didn't have the time to mess with it too much. Found something I liked pretty quickly and just left it at that. And again, it is an absolute... Started with an absolute duplicate of the chord track that was copied in, but again, I modified the samples. I think I shifted these up an octave and only used 3 notes rather than the 4 notes of the in the pad shop. So just creating slightly different voicings of the same chords, just for some sort of sonic variability. Let's have a listen to what the scanner sounds like. I like the warbliness of that that sound there, where it sort of warbles out towards the end of each measure. So that was really cool. I used that as the harmonic bed of the track, and I used that chord sequence to then experiment with everything else. That was really the first thing I worked on, and then I used that as a foundation to build the other sort of sonic creatures crawling over the top of that bed. To start with the percussion, so let's go up to the drum tracks. Drums are up here, all in pink. And I started with... So this was built in GrooveAgent. So I basically loaded up a preset. Not even sure which preset it was. I think maybe one of the 8-bit kits or the ambient kit. Something that had some patterns in there that I thought sounded pretty good, that would work for the song I had in mind. And then all I did was come into the sample, right click up here and replace sample. And then I went into the 6mod 6 sample pack and replaced those kick, snares, hats, so on and so forth with a decent replacement from this library. I can't remember which exact ones because I sort of auditioned them and made a list and then went through them. But let's take a quick listen to some of these. So a variety of sounds there, nothing groundbreaking or earth-shatteringly original. Just try to get a good array of drums that would work with the preset pattern, and I didn't really mess with sample end times. Didn't even really get into any of the sound shaping tools in GrooveAgent. Just left it as it is. Then went to the pattern and basically dragged one of these patterns into the arrangement timeline. So other than just this intro bit here that I programmed, like an intro fill that I sort of programmed by hand, this is the same beat, kind of very lazily just duplicated several times across the main arrangement part of the track, and it sounds a little something like this. Again, nothing earth-shatteringly creative or brilliant about that, but it had a good groove to it. I liked how it felt. I liked the sounds. Sort of picked the sounds out of the 6mod 6 pack and thought they were really cool. So as I said, I was short on time, so I was like cutting every corner that I could. So it is what it is. I duplicated the track and renamed that Beaties. Me little beaties. So in this instance of GrooveAgent, I basically used the Zumu 11, which I believe was the Percons set. Let's have a quick listen to some of these. Again, just a selection of the hits that sounded good. I auditioned very quickly that folder and found a few additional samples that would sort of augment the main beat. So again, I just used the replace sample technique. So everything else, all being correct, will just stay intact, even though there was no real editing done. It's just a technique I use all the time. If I have some sound shaping done and I just want to replace the samples, I can do that just by clicking up here and replacing the sample for each pad there. Not the quickest way, but I think it saves time in the long run. Like I say, if you find yourself doing filter settings or envelope settings that you use over and over again, those things can take a fair amount of time to set up and get right. Do that once on one channel, just duplicate the track and then replace the sample. I think it saves a lot of time in the long run. I know you can just drag a bunch of samples onto one thing and it will distribute them, but it replaces all of those other envelope and filter type settings. So also like anything in the mixer as well, all those things are sort of retained. So I find that quite handy. So that is the BTs is like a sort of secondary ambient sort of kit, and I dragged a couple of the patterns from GrooveAgent. Again, I think I've got like 3 different patterns, just for variability, and I think the track starts with just the ambient. And then there's a couple places that it's a bit more sparse. I thought that worked really well with the main beats. As you can hear, there's some movement, there's some sort of panning and stuff going around. So we'll get to the effects in a moment. But I have like a sparse, a medium, and a busy sort of pattern, and that is worked throughout different sections of the song. So if we look at the audio inserts, you can see I've got a delay. This is a HY delay from HY effects. This is the free version. There is a full paid version of this. This is just the free version. It's actually a surprisingly good delay for free. It has a lot of features. The paid one has obviously a lot more, but this is actually pretty good. Just set up some stereo ping-pongy sort of stuff, and then I put in some stereo imaging, again just to sort of spread that around. I wanted the main beats sort of front and center, and then this percussive stuff going off all around. That was the general intent. And then of course got some just built-in Cubase Roomworks reverb, just with a drums preset. Again, not focusing too much on sound design, just grabbing some presets here and tweaking a few things. So that is me little secondary beaties. Oh, this is just another sort of secondary loop. We'll just skip over that. That was a little bit of a cheaty sample I grabbed that I intended to remake with the sample pack, but forgot about it. I just forgot that was actually in there. Okay, so I wanted to add some focal hits, some grunge, some industrial grime to the rhythmic content, but I didn't have time to get into like beat splicing and gluing little micro samples everywhere. So another quick and dirty trick that I use every once in a while, again, I duplicated the GrooveAgent track and replace the samples with the Godfather set. Again, I auditioned a few of the favorite ones and just placed them around the pads, again using replace sample. Now in this case I did go in and mess with the filter envelopes quite a bit, and I added the classic filter, high pass 24, lowered the cutoff, added a fair amount of negative envelope, and that gives it some I also set the mode to loop, so you get some constant motion in that. And it's also sort of snaps to 16th notes, so we have like a one measure loop here going on. The amp is and the pitch are the same, just the filter. Also, I believe we have, let's take a look on the right, and on the master bus I have a reverb, again just one of the presets. I think I just took a studio reverb, put that on there, and a multi delay, again just use one of the ping pong presets, and that's how we get that stuff sort of bouncing around all over the place. Again, I just wanted this to be sort of an industrial hit, thinking it's just going to play here, there. You have the beats going on, the overall percussive content, and then just these accents here and there that I wanted to be like little accents. So normally I might do something like this and then use stutter edit to, you know, mash things up, and I'll spend time programming stutter edit and then record out an audio sort of section, bounce that to audio, and then slice little bits that I really like. No time for that, obviously. So what I did was go into the MIDI inserts and use an instance of Step Designer. So I have a 16, let's go down to pattern 1. I have an 8-step pattern, and I basically looked, I opened up GrooveAgent, and I can look at the what notes were in here, C1, C sharp 1, D1, so on and so forth. So I knew where I was, the range that I was playing with. So I set these notes. I messed with just randomly mess with the velocity and the gate and the harmonics. Just mess with those, just random curve, no real sort of forethought. Then I copied this pattern, copy there, go up to pattern 2 and pasted it. And then, oh, I should also say that I have number of steps was 8, but also the step size was a half note. So these are 8 half notes. So that is like 4 measures. These are just going off every once in a while. Pattern 2, we have 16 half notes, so it's a longer measure, so there's more sort of variability. Again, just random sweeps of the velocity curves and so on. Changed the notes around a little bit. I knew that I was up in the sort of C1 to B1 range, so I just kind of clicked and dragged around just randomly. Copied and pasted that again. I have a third pattern of 8 steps of quarter notes, and I did this 5 times, where I have 12 steps of dotted quarters and 16 steps of 16th notes. So each pattern has a different rhythmic pattern, fingerprint, if you will. So and then I have pattern 6, nothing. That will be my sort of kill switch. And so what I would do is then in the MIDI layer, in the arrangement timeline, I just write in a note of C1, C#1, whatever that might be. So that triggers that pattern. That's the cool thing about Step Designer. Now I'm no longer, these MIDI notes are no longer triggering the notes in GrooveAgent. I'm triggering the pattern in Step Designer. So I can change those patterns. You can see I'm calling different MIDI notes. Pattern 6, which would have been, I believe, if we go to the MIDI inserts, it doesn't really show, but I believe that pattern 1 corresponds to, and I had to figure this out by sort of trial and error on my keyboard, but I think it's way down, like sort of C-1, like MIDI note 10 or something like that, way down the sort of bottom end of the keyboard. By playing those notes, you're changing the pattern in Step Designer. So it's so low, you're probably not messing with your your MIDI note content too much, but you can change patterns. So that's what's going on there. And so I have the busy stuff, the 16th notes, 16 steps, 16th notes, and the busy section, and the sort of 8 half notes on the very sort of quiet section. So I can control the density of those accent hits. Then of course when I want to turn it off, I call up pattern 6, which has nothing in it. I hope all that makes sense, but it's a lot quicker than slicing and dicing. You can just random brushstrokes, put in notes where you want the sort of patterns to go denser, and let the Cubase tools do a lot of that heavy lifting for you. That's the main sort of focus of this this walkthrough, using the tools in Cubase or whatever workstation you're using to help you get some heavy lifting done when you're in a time crunch, when you're looking for inspiration, all that kind of stuff. So that's the grime. Let's find another section that might be less busy. Let's go to the beginning. There it's obviously very busy. You can hear the difference between the really busy section and the less busy section. So doesn't sound much on its own, but when all the drums are together, it sounds pretty good. So let's do that. Let me solo all of the drums together, and So that's one section. Let's get to, let's go into here, section 3, which is the main. And then let's do one more section just to get a variety. We'll do the change between section 4 to section 5. So you can see there, with very little work, couple of stock patterns copied across various sections, and you can see up at the top here I've got section 1, which is the intro, or I call that the hard start, or I call this the soft start, because there's a little bit of a fade in, then boom, we're right into the song. None of that usual sort of fade up that, you know, I might do. I wanted this to sort of stand out from that. I knew there would be a lot of people doing that typical ambient approach where we just build up layers over time. When it comes to a crescendo, then breaks down again. And I wanted it to be short, or shorter than the stuff I usually do. So I just kind of went boom right into a full energy sort of part of the song. Book it down at section 2 for a little bit of a pre-verse, if you want to call it that. Again, I told you we've got a punk mindset, punk rock, where I'm thinking in verse, chorus, you know, middle 8 lead solo type thing. So this is like a pre-verse, and I have the main body of the song. Then I've got like section 4, which is all the sort of solo parts where the guitar and keyboard solos do a bit. We have like a middle 8 and sort of breakdown, if you will, or the drop. I'm not sure if that term is used correctly. I have no idea what the drop actually is. I've just heard real producers talk about it. Anyway, and then section 6 is my outro. So that's how I sort of break things down structurally, and try to keep an eye on that as I'm layering things up. Okay, so let's mute all those again, and let's look at the bass. So the bass, I used the Waldorf M24 samples. Let's take a look at that again. This was an instance of GrooveAgent. This time though, I key mapped them, so I dragged. We have C and sometimes G. In the sample packs that Loopop put out, we have C on every octave, or almost every octave. Sometimes we have C and G in every octave, so it depends on which pack. I believe in this case I just used the C. But what I did, if I went to pitch and I go key range, I can then map the low key, and if I go down, you can see I've mapped these pads with the little notes are the sort of interpolated, the key mapped ones, and you can see I've got no data there. I can't mangle this data because this is the actual note. And then I've gone from G to G, with obviously the actual sample being C, so I'm kind of going down, I'm going above, and then I do that. Obviously this is C1. Then for C2 I do the same thing, go down to G, then up to G, and I do that all the way across the octaves. As you can hear there, what I've got again is, let me find, I have a bit of a fast filter envelope. For the most time, the bass samples are just played like as part of a rhythm, so they're really sort of 16th or 8th notes long, so we don't really get into this. But when there are sustained bits, I added a little bit of motion, which is it isn't used that often. I think it's only really used a couple of places in the intro. The amp envelope is pretty much the same. I haven't really messed with any of the sampled stuff, no sort of looping or anything like that. Although I believe In the master bus on GrooveAgent, again, I have a tube compressor, again with just a preset grabbed out of here. I have tape saturation, again with a preset for the drum fattener probably. And I have some chorus, obviously can't have a bass without a little bit of chorus. So that is that. Let me zoom in. On the intro, I just have just one note, I just have a C note playing, C2 that looks like, and we get to the pre-verse. I'll call it a pre-verse even though it's not really a verse. I have a C and a G sharp. What do I have? Oh, it's an A flat. So I'm using the sixth. So I'm using the root and the sixth, and that is just to sort of slowly build up to the full riff, which again, this is taken from the chord track back in the arranger document that was dragged and dropped, and I've got all those notes from the chord track baked into MIDI events. So it's the same C minor, A flat, G sharp, G minor, D augmented, that same chord progression. And so the bass is sequenced by playing those chords into an instance of Apache, the arpeggiator. And I've just got a down 8th note step size and just fairly standard settings, just sort of clicked on them out of habit. But what happened was came up with this. Give us that cool arpeggiated 8th note bass line that I just love. Just total happy accident. I could have spent hours before coming up with that bass riff on my own. So that is just the chord track baked into MIDI notes, feeding into the arpeggiator with just an 8th note arpeggiation. Very, very cool. I love that. And I feel that bass groove really is like the sort of the foundation of the song, and that was really just a happy accident. So, and that again comes from using the tools in your DAW, experiment quickly and find something that you really like. So moving on, and then I have for like the middle 8 sort of solo section, I have a slightly different chord progression, maybe just sort of roots and thirds, roots and fifths, and then again for the outro part, we're just doing roots, sort of root octave type of feel there. Nothing sort of groundbreaking, but very effective. After that, I duplicated the ARP, the GrooveAgent Waldorf M24 track, and I turned off the Apache arpeggiator and just had like one long drone note at the beginning, and there was like a little sort of fill that leads us back into the and a little run at the end. So these are just some just where I wanted the bass sound, but I didn't want the arpeggiator. I just duplicated the track and turned off the arpeggiator, and then just, you know, use some of those sounds. Pretty straightforward. Then I have a bass pad. So what's a bass pad? It's just a pad sound that is very low in the register. And for that, I used the Nymphs N9. Same process. I probably just duplicated the Waldorf M24 track, swapped out the samples. Again, because these are all mapped, I just swapped out the sample. It saved me having to redo all that mapping process. Messed with the filter a little bit, slightly different settings. Messed with the amp here, slightly different settings. Slightly slower settings here. So it's very quiet. I think it's very low in the mix. But that is such a lovely sound. So that's the bass pad, very low and rumbly, and it just sort of fills out the bottom end nice and thick. On the mixer, same effects, the compressor, tape saturation, and chorus. Again, these are just inherited from the track that I duplicated. And again, these notes are mapped because they're mapped with the key range. There we go, the key range function, just mapped across the whole spectrum there. So audio inserts just have a T-Racks compressor, again one I use all the time. I like it. I know it's paid. You can probably find just stock plugins that will do just fine. The bass pad is just, there we go, bring that down. Just a 6-note root, third, fifth, root, third, fifth, 2-octave spread of a big fat juicy chord. Nothing spectacular there. Let's have a listen to that. Let's solo that, shall we? Oh, and of course I have an arpeggiator on there because I duplicated that track. The arpeggiator came with it. That sounds quite tasty. And then obviously in the middle here I have a slightly different chord voicing. I just have like root third, fifth, root third, seventh by the looks of it. So just simplified and a little lower in the register, and that sounds like so just some variations on the same theme to identify the different sections. That is the bass pad using the Nymphs N9. We have a swell pad. Gee, that's just swell. And that is used the Nymphs N5. Same thing, duplicate the track. It inherits, oh, it doesn't inherit the what Jimmy calls it. This must have been created from scratch. This didn't, or maybe I deleted the master effects. But once again, they're key mapped across several octaves using that same technique. So that is very low. Let's go a little bit higher up here because this is more the range I used it anyway. I didn't use a very low register for this. Just a nice swell drone. Didn't mess with any of the settings here, just sort of left it as is. It was it's a great sounding sample. I just wanted to leave the sort of sonic quality of that alone. I may have put some insert effects on there. In fact, I just used the same T-Racks compressor, and I have an instance of Tal filter just to fade out at the end. I don't use the filter other than just to sort of fade out at the end. That is the only time that filter comes into play. And let's listen to the intro part of the swell pad. And yeah, so there's no MIDI inserts at all. Such a great haunting sound, lovely. And then in the so here it looks like we're using a bit of a, yeah, the same root 3rd, 7th, root 5th, 7th type of voicing, I think, by the looks of that. And then drops out in the middle, and then it's got the same large chord that we use in the beginning. So that is the swell pad, Nymphs N5. Oh, I have a bit of a just a quick accent bass synth here. Just a big, beefy drone and an instance of the lead synth, and this was the N3. Not the the Nymphs N3. So let's listen to this little just a little lead thing that was sort of played with the beat step pads that were mapped to the C minor, like a 2-octave C minor scale, and I just sort of played those, played a little melody over that for the intro. And I have another synth lead. Let's take a listen to that in the middle. So that nice bright sound punches through the song with a little bit of focus. And again, duplicate the GrooveAgent track and swap out the samples, and they are mapped across a much smaller range actually this time. Let's take a look. There's no filter. Oh, the amp has a little bit of an envelope just to give it a longer sustain and a little bit of a sort of short release. So in the mixer, same effects basically: compressor, saturation, and chorus again. Obviously that was duplicated tracks, so those all came with it. And in the insert effects, I just have a compressor again, a T-Racks compressor. So that's the synth lead parts. Pad Shop and SkannerXT we've looked at already. So now in green we come to the guitar. So with all the body of the track laid down and adjusted for good voicing, it's filling out quite nicely. I tracked the guitar parts. Now, I just got a PolyFX Bebo, and rather selfishly and stupidly, I was determined to use it in the track. If I could redo it, I would leave this out. The Bebo is incredible and creative and inspiring, but the sonic texture I added for this this guitar part was so similar to the granular synth stuff that it really added nothing. It kind of sort of got in the way and didn't really do much for me. So, hindsight. I did record some. Well, let's take a listen to that first. We can listen to the Bebo guitar. Let's solo it first. Might be a good idea. So I'm just playing a C minor chord here, building up to the full chord sequence. Where I think here I recorded some nice clean chords, which actually did counterpoint the big swelly sort of wall of sound from the synths. The nice clean chords actually. Let's listen to these. Yeah, this is more of the sort of the granular stuff that I did on the Bebo. Sounds really nice, but it sounds very, very similar, like I said, to the pad shop and to the scanner. So really kind of wasted a lot of time doing that. What I do with the guitar, especially when I don't have the time to learn a part and rehearse it and record it in a, you know, end to end, or at least section by section, I will record segments. Like for here, you can see I've recorded the 4-bar sort of segment broken up in 2. So I'm playing one chord here on this track, and then a chord here, and then a chord on the next track. So it just affords me time to make the chord changes cleanly, just play them, then I can sort of edit the volume, edit the attack, overlap them, offset them, and cut and paste them as I need. That's a technique I use all the time when I'm in a crunch and I'm trying to learn a part and it's like, okay, I'm not getting it, I'm not able to play it all the way through. It doesn't matter, this is studio work, so I'll record one chord, place it, record the next chord, place it, and offset it like I have here with the clean guitar. And let's take a look at these. You can see I've recorded each chord in that progression by itself and then just offset it, and it allows me to sustain that chord, overlap it into the next one, then fade out. It makes for a nice, smooth, seamless progression. These clean sort of clean strum guitar parts, I think they cut through nicely, and like I said, they add a nice counterpoint to the big swelly stuff. So that was the clean guitar and the granular guitar. So the solo was played, you know, in one take or in one part. It was done in probably 3 takes. It was played through the Bebo again with a nasty fuzz preset. I rehearsed that a dozen or so times before I was confident I could get it the same and get it right. And then I recorded it in 2 or 3 takes. But I ended up just using half of one of those takes because it was getting too long and I wanted to leave room for the synth solo. And that down here. So no inserts on that, no effects, but I'm just sending some delay and to the delay and verb auxiliary sends. So that's the solo. That is the guitars. Let's talk about the vocals. One final idea that occurred to me as I was finishing up. I'd been listening to Radiohead's OK Computer, and I had the idea of adding a computerized AI voice. I thought the theme of 2021 would be a cool little gimmick. So I typed up this text edit document with the numbers spelled out: 2021, 2021, 2021, and Loopop. And then I auditioned all of the mini voices that come installed on Mac OS. And so, having listened through all those, I settled on like a pixie robot female voice and a very deep male voice to like sort of offset and counterpoint that. And that sounds like
2 0 2 1.
And I use those at various points throughout the track, and I just send those to some verbs. Don't really do much in the way of processing, just kind of recorded them. I used an app called Audio Hijack Pro to record the system sound, and I had Text Edit speak those words that I had typed into that document, into the what I called the script. And with a little experimentation, just cut them out and then just copied and pasted them down the timeline in the arrangement. So that is all of the tracks in isolation. Let's play the track, or at least find a couple of sections of the track, and then just start layering those songs one at a time. So we'll start with the drums. Let's start with the hard start intro. Let's see. Let's add in the grime. Just add in the bass. Let's add in the bass pad. Let's add in the swell pad. And the synth lead. And let's add in the granular guitar.
0 2 1.
Okay, so let's listen to like the main body part right here. Let's turn it all off again, and let's just leave the drum. Turn on the secondary, the wide drums, I suppose I should call them, because they're more stereo. Let's turn on the grime hits. On the bass. Turn on the bass pad. And then in the swell pad. And then we have the granular synths, the pad shop and the scanner. Pad shop and scanner are panned like sort of left and right, so you have a different sort of, there's similar sounds but slightly different, and obviously adds a bit of stereo spectrum to the. And then let's guitar in there. Let's just do the part 5 at the end. We got a few little, actually, let's listen to the bits with the solo then. That would be decent. Let's build all these up again. So we'll start with the drums. So just leave all the drums on this time, I think. Let's bring in the pad shop and the scanner. Let's bring in the bass. There's no bass pad, these are no swell pad, these aren't in here. Cut the pad, the big thick sounds out of this section because the solo is at the sort of front. We want to manage how much sound we have going on. But let's turn on the lead synth. The vocal samples. Do the guitar solo. All right. So that's my track and the workflow I used to create it. I've been using Cubase for a long time, so if I glossed over anything or went too quickly or didn't explain it clearly, just ask questions in the comments. I'll be happy to answer. This workflow is something I've sort of developed organically over the years, and I pretty much work this way all the time these days. I hope you learned something or inspired to try some new technique. I'll post the Cubase project for you to download, and I'll render out the stems in case you don't have Cubase and you want to remix it or play with it or whatever. The link for that will all be in the description. I think the main takeaway from this exercise is using tools like Chord Track, Arpache, Step Designer, and the many other little things that a Cubase or any other DAW has built in. They can really be an aid in the songwriting process, either when we're in a pinch creatively, or they can, if you're short on time, you want to experiment, sort of do iterations without having to, you know, get sort of slicing and dicing. Chord Track's great for iterations, Step Designer, all those things are great for quickly trying different things out. The tools can kickstart your creativity and take you down a different avenue, if nothing else. So anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share to help my channel. I'm going to let the finished track play out now. Thanks for watching. Until next time.
2 0 2 12021